Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church. I know this is going to sound really confusing, and so I want to shed some light on it because although we consume a lot of wine here and we offer up wonderful dinners here, we are not a bar, we are not a restaurant, we are a church, and I'm going to get a little decal from the governor's office to put right in front of the window there so people have it figured out. This is indeed a church. This is a free religious community. In this church, we renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life. Here we reclaim the vision of an earth made fair and all its people one. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. May we open our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Well, it's Mother's Day, and I could tell to look out that there are still a lot of moms finishing up their breakfast in bed this morning, or maybe out for an early lunch with an adult child. And it's Mother's Day. Now, we may turn our backs on the commercial enterprise by which we are implored to purchase garish tokens of love to shower upon our mothers. But I think and I trust they're too smart for that. A small and creative and heartfelt token goes much further in expressing a genuine affection and appreciation. And so it's Mother's Day, which always stirs up memories and sentiments. It may be a time for recalling special moments of joy. It may also be a time for the need to forgive. But certainly a time for us to stop and notice and remember and to search our hearts. So may we take a moment to unite our minds and our hearts in a spirit of prayer and meditation and reflection. O Spirit of life and love, we give thanks for those who have reared us. We give thanks for those who have nourished us through sleepless nights and restless days, who have seen us through the good times and bad, who have celebrated our triumphs and suffered through our defeats. We are grateful for their gentle touch and firm hand. We pay silent tribute to the moms no longer among us, and speak a soft thanksgiving to those who are. And may we who have been nurtured also be nurturers to those who follow. Our reading this morning covers a subject that we all know to be true, especially the women here who are at the workplace. They really have felt this truth in not necessarily positive ways, in fact, quite the opposite. But even though it's something we all know to be true, it's really good to hear it said out loud. And the writers of this particular piece, Adam Grant is a professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and Sheryl Sandberg is the chief operating officer for Facebook. And they collaborate really on a number of articles dealing with women at the workplace. And here's a snippet of one. Late one Friday afternoon at a leading consulting firm, a last-minute request came in from a client. A female manager was the first to volunteer her time. She had already spent the entire day meeting with junior colleagues who were seeking career advice, even though they weren't on her team. Earlier in the week, she had trained several new hires, helped colleagues improve a presentation, and agreed to plan the office holiday party. When it came time for her review for partner, her clear track record as a team player combined with her excellent performance should have made her a shoo-in. Instead, her promotion was delayed for 6 months and then a year. This is the sad reality in workplaces around the world. Women help more but benefit less from it. In keeping with deeply held gender stereotypes, we expect men to be ambitious and results-oriented, and women to be nurturing and communal. When a man offers to help, we shower him with praise and rewards. But when a woman helps, we feel less indebted. She's communal, right? She wants to be a team player. The reverse is also true. When a woman declines to help a colleague, people like her less, and her career suffers. But when a man says no, he faces no backlash. A man who doesn't help is busy. A woman is selfish. Not long ago, a female senior executive we know was sitting at a board meeting next to several more junior male colleagues when the board chairman asked her to fetch him a soda. The Harvard professor, Rosabeth Moss Cantor, observed that women do the lion's share of office housework, the administrative tasks that help but don't pay off. Someone has to take notes, serve on committees and plan meetings, and just as happens with housework at home, that someone is usually a woman. Joan C. Williams, a professor at the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, finds that professional women in business, law, and science are still expected to bring cupcakes, answer phones, and take notes. These activities don't just use valuable time, they also cause women to miss opportunities. The person taking diligent notes in the meeting almost never makes the killer point. Now, men can help solve this problem by speaking up. We observe that men have a habit of dominating meetings and interrupting women. Well, instead of just quieting down, men can use their voices to draw attention to women's contributions. Men can also step up by doing their share of support work and mentoring. At a recent event we attended, 30 chief executives gathered around a dinner table for a conversation about closing the gender gap. With an even mix of men and women in the room, we expected the office housework to fall to a woman, but the one person who took notes the entire time was the founder of the Virgin Group, Richard Branson. It's often said that no good deed goes unpunished. It doesn't have to be that way. We can all benefit from encouraging both women and men to help and rewarding them equally when they do. We hope you'll take some steps in this very direction. So how do you really feel about that? We have a number of announcements. Some are just fun and some are just necessary. This is a church, we got to remember that. So the fun announcement, the most fun announcement, next Sunday is a big day. It's the choir will perform the Requiem, choir en masse, instrumentation, timpani drums. I mean, it's just going to be fantastic. It's really a highlight of every year, and I just want to tell you that next Sunday is when it's going to happen, only to be followed by the Congregational annual meeting. So I hope that the Requiem doesn't set a tone for the Congregational meeting, because we've really had a banner year. It's been a fantastic year, and we have everything to look forward to in the upcoming year. And it's going to just be, I think we're just going to explode. And along those lines of just how well everything is going, I do want to mention that we are within 1% of reaching our pledge goal, within 1%. And so we're not done yet. We're not done yet. So just in case there are people here who haven't handed in their pledge card yet, please either help us meet the goal or, God forbid, push us over the goal. And that will be really the first time in my 30-year ministry here that we've exceeded the goal. So I'd love to see that happen, and it was an ambitious goal. Speaking of financial matters, The choir has been absolutely magnanimous in their fundraising events. In fact, the choir has raised over $15,000, which shows you that those of you who've been here all through the year, selling those bagels, bagel by bagel, you can make a lot of money, you know. Obviously, I've done a lot more than that, but because you, the congregation, have been so gracious in buying probably more bagels than you can eat for a good cause, that in 2 weeks, on Memorial Day Sunday, May 28th, we're going to have a bagel bash where all the bagels are gratis. They're just for you. And so if you are wondering whether or not to come to church on the 28th, come to church and just pack in those bagels. It'll be good. They're on the house as a thank you from the choir. And also want to mention that one of the most successful fundraisers that we have is the salon that David presents at his home. And we have one more left, and that's going to be Sunday, June 4th. And because David's home is a little smaller than this chapel, seating is limited. And so during the 9 o'clock service, we had 7 people raffle in order to take part or to be an audience in this particular salon. And 7 people at this service will be able to enter a raffle as well. So the coffee hour, please find your way to the raffle table and get a raffle. Hopefully you will be a winner for June 4th's salon. Also want to mention that immediately after church, just enough time to grab a cup of coffee, finish it, and then come back here if you wish. We're going to review the church budget, which will be presented at the annual meeting next Sunday. So if you have any questions or concerns or just want some help in noodling through this massive document, finish quickly your cup of coffee and come back here about 5 minutes after the service. Also want to mention, please take a look inside your program. There are 2 fantastic films that are coming up. You can look at the details. One is called Screenagers, and the other is a social justice film. Both really, really important and excellent. And 2 announcements that did not make it into the order of service. Well, one did and one had some wrong information. Anti-Racism Committee meeting tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. in room 207. And for those of you, and I think everyone is really concerned about Bears Ears and want to send in your comments because we know they're all being listened to intently. The change is, and go into the environmental ministry table at coffee hour. There's a change of where to direct your comments. We are now asking you to send your comments directly to SUA, and Joan can give you the link on how to do that. I think, believe it or not, that ends the announcements. The offering will now gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another, bid each other welcome, and throw in a happy Mother's Day if it feels right. From 1868 until 1872, those 4 years, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton published a weekly women's rights newspaper called The Revolution. It may not have achieved its goal, but I think the revolution may have arrived this year. Although equity in salary still faces huge chasms, there's a newfound spirit of revolution that has seized women like never before. Now, the Revolution newspaper called for equal pay for equal work. Since women were excluded from unions, Susan B. Anthony founded the Working Women's Association. Men called her the enemy of labor. But the Revolution newspaper not only struggled to gain the right to vote for women, it also advocated a revolution in human rights. Women at that time could not own their own property, nor have the right to retain their own earnings. Based on English common law, women were put in the same legal category as children and insane persons. The revolution has arrived. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before a revolution can find its gravitas. But we can't fall any lower than where we find ourselves today. But if one positive thing can be said about this president, is that he has purged all complacency from the very being of our souls and set fire to a raging indignation. The revolution is finally at hand. In January, the Women's March on Washington and march on more than 500 cities in this country, not to mention throughout the world, signaled that the time has come for real justice to flow in this land, quenching the parched deserts of inequality that affect rights, health, and safety. First, what does injustice look like? We all received a rather graphic image. You may remember that photo taken about a month ago. 24 white Republican congressmen, 0 women, 0 people of color, just 24 white guys around a White House conference table discussing the elimination of maternity and newborn care as part of the replacement for the Obama health care law. What does injustice look like? Well, earlier this week, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell convened a 13-man working group on health care. All are foes of the Affordable Care Act. Women's health will now be decided by the likes of Ted Cruz, Mike Lee. I'm going to stop right there. What does injustice look like? When the vice president breaks a 50-50 tie in the Senate that allows states to defund Planned Parenthood. What does injustice look like? When women in the military are beleaguered by revenge porn and sexual assault. Suffering the indignities of sexual harassment at Fox, Silicon Valley, Uber, universities throughout the country. Budgets slashed that support victims of domestic crime. Women sense a very real and present danger. This is very different from the women's movement launched by Betty Friedan's brazen call for women to get a life outside of wifehood and motherhood. Her book, The Feminist Mystique, published in 1963, didn't really add any new pieces that weren't uncovered by Ibsen's A Dollhouse, written 80 years before. It was more about women gaining a life of their own, a room of their own, It was more about that than confronting the real threats to women's health and safety, in addition to the inequities of pay. The women's movement that gripped our nation in the 1970s was more about women gaining access to higher education, gaining access to professional jobs. Mistakes were made. Women who chose to raise their kids at home lacked support by the movement. Women of color had different issues that took precedence, thereby precluding them from any real involvement in the women's movement. And nobody could really agree on what a feminist actually was and what her cause ought to be. Feminists fell into disfavor by the public, mostly for being acerbic, combative, and frankly, irrelevant. Initially, it was supposed to be all about women having the right to choose between home and the workplace. Women thought, well, we can have it all with a little help from our partners. But I think this dream of being a mother and a career woman fell apart because of a kind of, what comes to my mind, a kind of savage ambivalence between their nurturing instincts and the boredom that accompanies it. Too many aspirations remain unfulfilled by staying at home. And so feminism fell into a rather strange place, somewhere between feeling you weren't a good parent and trying to emulate men. All that has changed dramatically, where today an astounding 63% of all women, 63%, much higher among college-educated women, but still, across the board, 63% of women identify as feminist. And the feminist concept has expanded widely. Their concerns run the gamut from sexual assault and poverty to affordable education, immigration, and reproductive rights. The issue isn't so much home or work, mainly because women have come too far. 40% of all households in our country today have women as primary breadwinners. So the issue is different. The feminist issue today, as experienced and articulated mostly by millennial women, the issue focuses more on what the millennial women describe as a rape culture. We live, they say, in a rape culture. The election of a president whose personal history is massively steeped in disrespecting women has only exacerbated the culture which puts women constantly at risk. It's as though men now have license to just act upon their aggression with impunity. Now, what has activated women in these times? The misogynist attacks against Hillary Clinton, the threat to reproductive rights, and the roughly 50-year progress on civil rights, civil liberties, anti-racism, health care, LGBTQ rights, all these things coming to a screeching halt, hitting the wall, stopped cold in their tracks, in fact, thrown into reverse. Bigotry has been sanctioned in America today. What has activated women? The president's long record of sexism, gross behavior, and his pledge to dismantle health care that gives women access to birth control, even mammograms, and his pledge to nominate justices that will overturn Roe v. Wade. What has activated women? The sheer outrage that a man who represents everything women have struggled against for decades, an admitted molester who hurls vile insults at any woman who displeases him, now sits in the White House. There's a pervasive, sickening feeling that women are about to lose everything. Immediately after the election, Michelle Goldberg wrote for Slate, "The massive power of the American state is about to be marshaled to put women in their place." This feeling of utter despair has never been more palpable, at least in my experience, my entire life. And the call to resistance, the call to revolution, the call to activate all women to change the course that strips them of their personhood, has coalesced into a fighting spirit as though all our lives depend on it. And it does. It really does. You know, this menacing concept of putting women in their place has revived the frightening image presented by Margaret Atwood in her dystopian novel, The Handmaid's Tale, first published in 1958. It appears now, once again, on many reading lists and has become a much-discussed television series on Hulu. The story is reminiscent of that era when women could not hold property nor retain their earnings. So we know it can happen because, well, it has happened. In A Handmaid's Tale, women's bank accounts are frozen. The government has seized those accounts, and husbands automatically gain access to them. The role of women had officially been reduced to one job: reproduction. In fact, a woman is referred to as a womb on two legs. Women are forbidden to read or write. They're mere chattel. Should they attempt to read, their hand will be cut off. The authoritarian restrictions placed on women become imaginable once again in this our new era, where extremely conservative men are assembled to, well, essentially determine the fate of women. Slaves in the 19th century were not allowed to read or write, punishable by barbaric actions against their body. The hand would be cut, eyes gouged out. So we know it can happen because it has happened before. Let's be candid. The reactionary politics of this administration has given bullies permission to push women around. Male entitlement is the rallying cry of the base. Society has gone tilt. And this is one of the reasons why Sally Yates has emerged as this overnight sensation, a kind of hero. She's part of the revolution. I'm sure most of us have seen her in that exchange. And it was so astounding is that before we've never experienced a woman handle male condescension in such an easy and professional manner. If you notice, there was no ingratiating smile, there was no awkward laugh that refers to male power and stature. Instead, we got a glimpse into the resistance and a taste of the revolution sought as far back as Susan B. Anthony. The women's movement today feels different, thank goodness. This may be the best Mother's Day gift anyone could have hoped for. The movement has finally embraced women of color, or more precisely, women of color have embraced the movement. And so too have gay women. And the whole movement has shed its upper middle class NPR image and has become younger and more social media savvy. The women's movement today is less concerned about personal fulfillment and who changes the baby's diapers. Yeah, important issues to be sure. But the movement today centers on one key word: intersectionality. Intersectionality is a word that never made it to the feminine mystique. Intersectionality provides a new lens through which women, and actually all of us, can view the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. Primarily, it has been women who finally figured out that issues of justice for women are the same issues of justice for minorities. Oppression is oppression, where racial justice, immigrant rights, prisoners' rights, labor rights are all of a single piece. All oppression is connected, including the earth, which suffers the ravages of rape and violence. The women's movement now includes, in fact, it must include, defending the earth. Climate change, once thought of as gender neutral, affects women more, who as primary caretakers must tend to the children when they become sick from drought, starvation. Earth justice and racial justice and poverty issues, they are inseparable from one another. Intersectionality, then, is when people understand that actually they have multiple identities. Women's issues connect to poverty issues, which connect to climate change. Where once there may have been separate silos where people fought for their own private gains, the issues now are so interrelated that the silos can't help but bump into each other, if not, in fact, overlap. The movement towards justice is now younger, interracial, queerer, and has astutely concluded that different movements are all tied to the same mission. Income inequality is not just a woman's issue. Discrimination against immigrants is not just an immigrant issue. Poverty is not just a minority issue. The lens through which we look at justice, this lens observes the intersection of myriad oppressed people. If women are going to have a revolution, they must include poverty and racism, include it all in their cause, which is really now the cause for all. They must include protecting the rights of pregnant workers. They've got to include halting the bigotry that leads to attacks on transgender women and women wearing headscarves. There is no conceivable way to bypass fighting for the Affordable Care Act. Women, for example, who have had a cesarean will no longer be insured because that's a pre-existing condition. And that's lunacy that affects women of all races, affects women of all cultural backgrounds. And so this intersectionality has opened our eyes to a common plight that we all share. It has opened our hearts to feel the pain of another, that pain which resembles our own. And whether we gauge the rage by the decibel level when a congressman attempts a town hall meeting, or by the number of feet who march in a protest, activism has become the standard by which we unite in solidarity. Even scientists have left their ivory towers to take to the streets because they see the intersection of their loss of freedom with all facets of society oppressed by authoritarian rule. So what does it take to ignite a revolution? As Susan B. Anthony learned, women alone can't do it. No segment of society can create real change by itself. It takes all of us understanding that our neighbors' issues are our issues. Poverty affects every conceivable race and nationality. Health care impacts everyone. Earth justice cannot be separated from giving shape to tomorrow. Intersectionality is a word that could have come from the lips of the prophets, because it means compassion, it means generosity, it means the revolution is at hand. We've come a long way. Happy Mother's Day. Can we conclude our service? Turning our hymn books, please, to number 303. As we extinguish the chalice, may we close with these words, I think very fitting, by W.E.B. Du Bois. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work. And tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime.